The first preview issue for Milestone Comics. For some reason, I always want to call it Milestone. It's Milestone Comics. I don't know what's going on there. Anyway, the first preview issue dropped, and it's getting a lot of attention for what I would say kind of all the wrong reasons. It's very much a comic of the times. We've got Black Lives Matter protests. We've got white supremacists that are beating up people, and very very big socially charged book. Will this make money? Will it sell? I'm going to do a review of this book once some more material comes in. I don't want to join the crowd. Lots of people, first of all, lots of people are giving reviews of this initial kind of preview book already. Go chase those other channels. They've got it for you. They'll go into it with plenty of depth. I mainly want to talk about, does this type of stuff sell? Like, why do people think this type of stuff will sell? Everybody, this is Perch. Like I said at the beginning, I think Milestone is, it was announced to be relaunched. I think in general, a lot of people are pretty happy about that. I think Milestone holds a kind of uniquely special place in people's heart, partly because of the creators involved, partly because of, there's some good fan service, meaning not fan service as we think about it in terms of manga, but fan service in terms of there seemed to be a good connection between the creators and the fans when Milestone came out. And I think there's some beloved properties in there. Static Shock is one of those properties that always felt like it could do a lot more with just like a tiny bit more effort. If you just kind of market it and just put a little bit more effort into that, you'd have yourself a pretty good book. And it's one of those things where you look at say they're going with Naomi to try and create kind of this new black female character, and more power to them. But you'd look at that and you'd go, but you've got all these characters from the Milestone universe sitting there on a shelf. Like, you could potentially get a new audience and pull a nostalgia audience, both with some of this stuff. But anyway, like I said, I've been meaning to do a deeper review of Milestone, kind of what they were. And now that we have some new comics coming out, it's well past time to put that effort in. But what I wanted to cover today was simply, this first issue came out, and it reads like it's ripped from the headlines, which of course it was. It was, it's touching on kind of the social injustice, the police violence that has gone on, the counter violence that has happened, the touching on racism, and it is this a good idea for a comic? Well, I'll put all these answers forward. If you've listened to this channel for any length of time, you notice that generally I tend to recommend that writers go for what I call evergreen topics. The rip from the headline stories tend to age badly and tend to work out poorly over time because the world moves on. And like anything, if you want to blow up any movement, any kind of current trend, just over promote it, over market it, and it will implode. I think that is exactly what's funny is a lot of people on the right will say that Black Lives Matter is a dangerous group and everything else, and it needs to be stopped. And you hear these kind of comments, especially coming from like the Fox News and those channels. But the thing that's most likely going to quote unquote stop Black Lives Matter is like when Dunkin' Donuts starts like making the Black Lives Matter donut, or when Starbucks comes out with a campaign that says something like it's fall, it's time for your pumpkin spice latte, and it comes in a special commemorative Black Lives Matter cup. That's the stuff that blows up movements, and I think that's inevitably what will happen here. I think that America, especially kind of our Western culture, can't help itself. It cannot show restraint with these things, and it always just pushes it just too far, and it takes these movements, whatever they happen to be, down through merchandise and kind of wanting to glom onto it. And I mean, you're always seeing it with kind of Twitter handles. It just that defeats it far faster in people's minds because it's no longer kind of cool. It's no longer something from the people. It feels like a corporate kind of cog. And what's funny is like Starbucks and these kinds of companies, they don't realize that they are accelerating its demise by thinly veiling its connections to these efforts. Uh, and so I think where DC Comics is concerned, I read this book, and in many cases, this doesn't feel like Milestone to me. It feels like, some recognizable faces in there, certainly, but mostly it feels like, uh, it's trying to cash in on what's going on right now outside. And I think that it ages badly. I think it's even worse for comics because right now issues are being drawn for, say, 4 or 5 months from now, and we don't know what's going to happen. It could, the movement could backfire. Starbucks could run it into the ground. Who knows? But by the time these comics come out, they can. It's actually, I think it's more likely than not that the whole thing feels very old, and that's not great when you're launching a comic. But invariably, comics go for this stuff, and I think it's why I look at touching upon social issues in comics as it's dubious. It's dubious because it's very hard to do so in a way that is evergreen, that will survive the test of time, that will change. And if numbers show anything, sales figures indicate that these things are less likely to do well than others. People will often point to Watchmen, but you cannot pick up Watchmen and say this comic is a biting commentary of events outside our window right now. I mean, yes, there were political situations going on. Yes, there was a response to Nixon, but Nixon had happened far earlier. Some others have pointed to Reagan as being kind of some of the impetus, but Watchmen was told in a way that the politics and the backdrop of what was going on socially could change, and the comic would still hold up. Most of the efforts that are done feel like they're responding to something that 2 years from now people might not even remember. I mean, it's weird to say that, but I mean, we have short-term memories in our country right now. So I think it's a bad idea to go after this stuff. And like I said, you're going to see a number of videos out on this Milestone issue where they're kind of showing the pages. They're talking about propaganda, and you're going to get DC has gone all woke and everything else. But it's kind of like, I mean, maybe it's the semantics with the words, but it's like when Starbucks does their "We support Black Lives Matter" and we're putting out our commemorative cup. Has Starbucks gone all woke there, or have they gone all capitalist there, or what have they done exactly? Because these social causes, it's not like Starbucks is going, hey, we are going to double the salaries of our African American employees to try and make up for racial injustice in the past. They're not doing that. That, I would argue, would be more full on quote unquote woke policy. Making a Black Lives Matter commemorative cup where the profits are going to go into Howard Schultz's pocket doesn't feel like woke. And maybe that's where I differ from a lot of the people, like the videos that Richard Meyer would put out, or some of the others, big names. Is I see this as less go woke, go broke. I see it as more go kind of cheap capitalism and not make much money and just kind of stir up a bunch of garbage is kind of how it feels to me. It's maybe the ends, I mean, the end maybe all get you to the same place, so it doesn't matter. But to me, that's what this feels like. If we're talking about DC and Milestone, and this comic is an example of kind of social justice run amok, then I might ask, like, hey, so let's open up the books and take a look at the page rate of, say, take Brian Michael Bendis and Scott Snyder, and let's see what they're getting paid, and then let's head over here and see what what's Mags Masaggio getting paid. What's oh, it turns out there's a little bit of a difference there. You don't say. And so that's why it's like, what are we doing exactly with these kinds of experiments? They don't seem to resonate terribly well with readers. Now, maybe I'm wrong. I'd love to have egg on my face. I actually would, because comics are selling. But maybe this Milestone preview issue is going to get tons of attention, and the series is going to launch with 100,000 plus copies, and people are going to go nuts for it. But I have my doubts. because I don't think this story is what the masses, forget about the people, yelling on either side on social media, for or against. The masses, I don't think are going to go for this, mainly because they can turn on their TV and they can see this in real time. They don't need to buy a comic where there's kind of a superhero story injected into some of this stuff. I think that's the mistake. I think rip from the headlines doesn't work when the headlines themselves have gotten so dramatic and so crazy. Remember, in the 80s, Marvel, and the 70s too, Marvel was doing a lot of rip from the headlines type stuff, but the news was very dry. The news was pretty factual. The news was like, well, it was very dull. It was just the news. Today, the news is entertainment. And so the idea of when the headlines are entertainment, then the idea that you're going to put a comic book on top of that, it no longer works. It's like, yeah, you could throw Superman in this thing, but everything's crazy enough. Like, you can turn on CNN or Fox and get a crazy zoo of a show. You don't need a comic book anymore. So the headlines, ripping from the headlines starts to break down. You're going to have to bring more. But that's my take on it. I don't think this stuff, I mean, historically, we know from the numbers, this stuff doesn't tend to sell very well on average. And there's just diminishing returns. So, like I said, I'll do a video on Milestone and where it's all going. But at least at the beginning here, to start, it feels like, maybe a little less realism and maybe a little more, true nostalgic storytelling to the good old days of Milestone would be a smart move. But what do I know? Let me know your thoughts below on this whole topic. Again, please don't tell me that I've misinterpreted, something that Richard Meyer said here or there. I mean, I'm not trying to pick a fight with the guy. I'm trying to point out that a lot of YouTubers will say the go woke, go broke, or the company has gone all woke and all the rest. And I get it. But on the other hand, it's like if you really look into the true principles of quote unquote woke, that's not what's happening. We're getting these kind of, social rip from the headlines type stories where the money's all going to the same place. So, yeah, is this true? I mean, if you're going to go all social justice, go all in. You can't, don't take a half step. Otherwise, it's just a veneer. Let me have your comments below. Like, dislike, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Follow on social media. Most importantly, thanks for listening.